Hey everybody! Thank you all for joining me for my interview with Guy Hobbs of Hobbs Ong, the architect of the bond issue for the Raiders and now the Oakland Athletics ballpark. And now I present to you another longtime friend, Brent Turner. Actually, longer than Guy. Brent, welcome and how you doing, my friend?
Good. How are you doing, Zenny?
Great. And off camera, I was teasing my man here about his Van Dyke. It looks cool on you got the you look like you should be in one of those Antoine Fuqua movies, like Training Day with Denzel and maybe like the boss of him or an agent with a CIA or something like that. You look like you're ready for Hollywood, man.
Yeah, well, CIA, I've been hanging with that Jim Woolsey, so maybe some of it's rubbing off on me.
Oh, there we go. Hey, there we go. If the CIA needs an analyst, just don't forget my name.
I appreciate it. Yeah, no, they're doing their business, and I hope that they don't do anything but grace us with their friendly presence.
And hey, that is what you're doing here right now. And bring us up to date. What's going on with Alameda County? Because I'm actually going to open up the YouTube video that we're on and make another tweet to make it clear to folks that we're talking about voting both in Alameda County and Mississippi. But bring us up to date on voting transparency and ranked choice voting in Oakland and Alameda County from your perspective.
Well, we saw the county of Alameda become the hotspot for the U.S. A few months ago, and then it seemed to die down. But in its moment, everybody came to the realization that nobody knows what they're talking about. And that goes for Alameda County, and that goes for pretty much the United States when you're talking about election systems and software. It's kind of like real estate. People like to talk about it, and if they've sold a house or two, as if they have great expertise, or music, different little areas in life that people all feel like they share a common expertise. Well, elections has become one of those subjects, and I think we had to all admit when that ranked choice issue occurred in Alameda County that we don't know what we're talking about here, and that it's the technology has surpassed the abilities of not only the public but of the election officials. So I think Tim Dupuis, if that's the correct pronunciation
Yep.
of his name,
Yep.
he was left in a awkward position where he was defending and deflecting on behalf of Dominion and ranked choice voting, but really it was fairly awkwardly obvious that he doesn't know what he's talking about. Or if he does know what he's talking about, that's even worse, because that would make him almost complicit with that situation. So
Yes.
I'm thinking he just is naive or negligent, not corrupt and informed.
So, where do you place? And I have to really give a shout out to Tim for daring to join me. I didn't mean to trap the man, but he said what he said when he was on the show. But I think here's just a taste of what Brent is referring to regarding Mr. Dupuis, just for a few seconds. Excuse me here, because it's well worth recounting in terms of what Brent is talking about when we refer to how Mr. Dupuis came off. Well, here's a taste of the conversation, randomly selected almost.
Operating to represent what you and I and a bunch of other people would do, which is basically sit down and hand count these votes. Okay, Alyssa's vote goes to Shang. Alyssa's vote goes to Peter Liu, or
Yeah.
you get the point.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying. The the algorithm again, and I'm going to go back to our discussions at the beginning. There's some very smart people up at the Secretary of State that have evaluated, tested, and certified that. I keep calling it an algorithm. I just want to make that's what we call it. You want to call it an application. You want to call it a program.
Sure.
But the Secretary of State has, fully vetted and certified that program that we use, just like they've certified the ImageCast X, just how they've certified everything else in the system. And they've said that it tests and does exactly what you said. If we did it manually, we would come out with the same outcome as what the algorithm is doing against the data in the database.
That's right there.
Did
okay, hold on a second. Let me
anybody do
go for it, Brent? What are you saying?
Yeah, that's the heart of the matter for the issue in the United States. The certification process that Tim alludes to is a broken process per the father of the certification process, who is a fellow by the name of Roy Saltman, who told me personally, specifically, that the open source community for software had the right answer. If you are going to utilize software in the United States for an election system, it has to be open source software. In other words, software that everyone can see and vet. It can't be a corporate owned software that is private to the corporation creating it and the vendor creating it, and then running that through that so-called certification process, which consists of a independent testing laboratory doing a cursory inspection. They only get paid if they pass the system forward, which is an interesting little conflict that's fairly obvious and to be avoided. But the independent testing laboratories, the ITLs, are notorious for their lack of efficiency, which is attributable to the proprietary code and them not really being able to do a deep dive, nor having an inclination to do a deep dive. So this is the breakdown in the voting systems currently, is that they're issued through the national testing labs. They're issued their license plate to go into the stream of commerce, and they're not suitable for the use intended because we can't see if there has been bugs put in the system, either intentionally or negligently. But if there is problems with the system and you can't look at the system, and the voting system testing laboratories aren't fully looking at the system, you get what you get, which is what we have now, which is why we're trying to move forward in other states other than California with open source paper ballot systems.
And I want to make a point, folks. I randomly picked out that place in the video, randomly. So, and Brent gave his response. But what you're saying to me right now is it inaccurate to say you're giving up on California, or how should we think about what you just said?
Well, California has a political bloc in the Secretary of State's office. The people that are in the ear of the Secretary of State are not sure that they want the state to move toward open source election systems. As a matter of fact, they're quite cozy with the current vendors, the proprietary vendors that they've been doing business with for the past 15 years that we've had the electronic systems. So they're in a vendor lock-in where there's only a few vendors to choose from, and they seem to be comfortable with that relationship. I don't think the people of the United States are comfortable with the current relationship between the government and the corporations counting the votes, because I think it's prima facie ridiculous to have a corporation counting the votes of the people, because they have obvious predispositions. And the fact that we have a better system available waiting to take the field and do the work of the people, and they're not being allowed to participate because California has this predisposition toward privatized vendors. I think there's a real story there, and a lot of people are going to have some explaining to do, especially in regards to Alameda County and Shasta County, who threw out their proprietary systems recently.
Now, the Secretary of State that Brent mentions is currently Shirley Weber, and that is this young lady right here in search. Dr. Weber. Have you had a chance to talk to Dr. Weber about this since you mentioned her, Brent? Or
We've spoken with her extensively, and we're trying to nudge her into the light. She would be a perfect person, coming from a sharecropper family herself, and coming from Arkansas. She would be a perfect hero in this movie, but she, I think, is being blocked by her chief of staff, Susan Lapsley, who is not clear yet that open source is preferable and necessary for the democracy.
but you said that you kind of, but she's a black woman in a position of power who could impact the vote more positively for people who look like me. But you're saying that the current infrastructure, essentially, including our chief of staff. I don't know who chief of staff is. Again, you said the name of the chief of staff.
Susan Lapsley.
Susan, again, please.
Lapsley. Lapsley. Laps.
Lapsley, Cal Secretary of State. You're saying that basically she is being sort of the gatekeeper of the realm of what the problem is, or is that
Apparently her and the technology folks, the problem is they're not listening to the smartest people in the world. The smartest people in the world right now on this issue is a group called Voting Works out of California, and they're the ones that are in Mississippi now, with 6 counties following the technology lead. So we have the bizarre occurrence of Mississippi being ahead of California for election system technology.
wow?
And that in itself is a story to be investigated. I don't think that the national press is aware that there are voting systems that are better security and less expensive that are available to the registrars. But we've got the big boys, ES&S, Hart InterCivic, and Dominion, all in league with Microsoft as a lobbying effort, and they keep a pretty tight rein. But out of necessity, some places, specifically New Hampshire and now Mississippi, are moving forward with these open source paper ballot systems, which are being advocated by both sides of the aisle, which is interesting. So it's a nonpartisan advocacy effort.
It's difficult to find a current photograph of Ms. Lapsley, but I'll have to go with what this might be. And you can correct me if I'm off, Brent, but this is what I was able to find. And but it has her in another guise, I presume, before here. This is in the Sacramento Business Times.
I believe that's Susan. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I got the right person there. So that's
Yeah.
the
And,
chief.
and not to, be disparaging. She's very smart
Huh?
and I'm sure quite competent. Unfortunately, I think she's failing to recognize the gravity attached here to California's unwillingness to move forward swiftly and appropriately. And again, res ipsa, you're seeing Minnesota, I'm sorry, Minneapolis,
Mississippi.
Mississippi,
Yeah.
thank you. It's been a long day already.
Yeah.
Taking the lead here.
Hmm.
And so, which is fantastic, but it's embarrassing for California that we're left without a system that has been certified because they are relegated to the current proprietary certification process, which is, as we mentioned, a broken process,
Let me
and
ask.
they're not moving into the light of open source.
Let me ask you a question without intent to get you in trouble, or myself. But how much of this is slow rolled because you have a democratic power struggle between progressives, non-progressives? The party is at best 5% African American. Uh, Yet Democrats control the state of California and have for quite some time. So because of that, we have, if you like, evolved into different divisions. How much of this is a reflective of that intra-party battle, or is it?
I think 100% of it,
Wow.
because I think we've had moments. We did a documentary, myself, my good friend, former CIA director Jim Woolsey, Peter Coyote, called "The Real Activist." It's on Prime, Amazon, and
As we speak right now,
yes,
huh?
and so that shows the inner party turmoil that exists, because leading up to an election, we had everybody in the party on board, because they had to be on board, because nobody would say that they weren't for open source paper ballot voting, because that's a losing position. Yeah, that's it. Because it's, it goes against the science, so it makes it sound like you're a anti-vax or something. You're not understanding the science of the issue. So everybody from London Breed to David Chu, Malia Cohen, everybody in the town. There wasn't one politician that didn't advocate for open source voting. And we had an allocation of a few $1 million coming out of San Francisco to create the system. When COVID hit, that money evaporated in the dark of night, and that project fell apart. Then the group Voting Works came in, nonprofit vendor, to say, hey, we'll make you the system for free, just to show you how easy it is to do it, and you can lead the state and the nation. London Breed said no, for whatever reason. And to your question, the reason is because Microsoft doesn't like it. Microsoft, Oracle, the people that sell software, they don't like open source software. So for that reason, they are willing to block better voting systems from coming into the United States because of their shareholder interest. And that's the story that has happened here, why we're delayed 15, 20 years from doing the right thing when it comes to election system security in the United States, and why now you have Mississippi ahead of California, because Microsoft and the corporate lobbyists, they don't like open source because it is a free software that works better than what they're selling. It's a perfect application in the voting rights space. And they should stand down. And those who stand in their wake, as Bob in their wake, as Jim Woolsey says, should stand down on this issue because it's a national security crisis and they're in the middle of it. And when you see Alameda County trying to explain it away and deflect, it becomes embarrassingly obvious that we have a national security crisis that is vendor related, and we need to get out of this privatized space and move toward the open source model.
And it says here that U.S. elections, talking about the Real Activist documentary, are being hijacked by foreign governments because corporate-owned proprietary vote counting software is severely outdated and subject to undetected manipulation that is changing and then vote counts and election results. The Real Activist questions the legitimacy of the government itself through the personal lens of open source software activist Brent Turner. Congratulations, Brent, on this. It should be, I'm going to watch it tonight. Let me ask you, and I'll encourage everybody else to watch it. I didn't know about this. And so, but I know this man, obviously, because he's right here. But Brent, I'm going to repeat this because it's right in my face and it's in literally it's in white and black. Okay. US elections are being hijacked by foreign governments. I'm going to stop right there. All right. Because that never really hard came into our conversation regarding what was going on in Oakland last year. Explain how foreign governments are involved.
Well, I think there's a bit of sensationalism in the headline there.
Okay.
When it says they are being hijacked. We can't say with
Yes.
with specificity that they are or they are not.
Mm-hmm.
2016, we saw the security folks in the national offices. We saw them note that the Russians were inside the voting systems in 2016. The intelligence folks concluded they had made their way into the voting machines during the 2016 election. They didn't say that they were necessarily in the tabulation systems, but they mentioned that they were in the election systems. It's very conceivable that a foreign government, if allowed, would seek to cause chaos in our elections by lessening voter confidence.
Yes.
If nothing else, if
Yes.
not changing the vote counts.
Yeah.
And when we saw Hillary Clinton lose to Donald Trump in 2016, and then understood that Manafort had met with I'm trying to think of his name, Klemenov, at the cigar bar in New York, and
Right.
given him voting data that showed Michigan and other places, swing states, where it looked like there may be some vulnerability on Hillary's behalf. And those were the places where it was very difficult to legitimize those counts. And the process of legitimizing them through the audit process and recounts are challenged as well. So now you have a situation where you have Manafort giving information to a Russian agent. That same territory becomes suspect during the election. And now you have a president that some people don't think was elected as the elected leader, and the world changes. I met with Hillary Clinton previous and mentioned to her, we, as I did meeting with Senator Obama in 2007, that we have concerns about the voting systems. If you happen to lose and it looks suspicious, like there's an issue, don't just take it for granted that those counts coming from the software are legitimate, because you're in a proprietary system and we can't get a look to see if they're legitimate or not. And by the time you get to a recount, you have another problem, because recounts, although they can be conducted appropriately, they can also be conducted inappropriately. And then you would have a false reconciliation where your first count was not correct and your reconciliation count appears to prove your initial count. And now you have a bad situation, which Hillary suffered in 2016. In 2020, we didn't see those sorts of anomalies as much, although Trump raised hell about the paper ballot management and that's a whole nother issue. We as a country have never gotten to the software issue. I don't think people recognize the issue or understand it. And we saw in Alameda County, when you pull back the lid on the can of worms, it's a road to nowhere, because the vendor comes in and says, everything's working fine. The people say, show us. And the county says, we don't know how to show you anything, because we don't understand we don't understand the system ourselves, which I think is what happened in Alameda. And so now for Mississippi to blow by California and say, oh no, we're doing it with the good technology, it's a fantastic story that I think you're the first one to hit on it.
And I want to, on that note, replay back a segment that Tim Dupuy and I had from that interview last year. Wow, time flies. Based on what Brent just told us. Listen to this.
Hey, did you evaluate this particular device against a real-time equivalent of you and I sitting down and actually counting? Because if there is a difference, Tim, that is an error term. And it sounds like that exists.
It does exist. Yeah, the Secretary of State has gone through the level of vetting, I believe, that you're talking about.
Okay. But you're not certain. But you're not certain.
No, I am certain that they've gone through the vetting.
Okay.
And then we have our logic and accuracy testing, which, gives some degree of testing.
Did you evaluate this particular device against a real-time equivalent of you and I sitting down and actually counting? Because if there is a difference, Tim, that is an error term. And it sounds like that exists.
It does exist. Yeah, the Secretary of State has gone through the level of vetting, I believe, that you're talking about.
Okay. But you're not certain. But you're not certain.
No, I am certain that they've gone through the vetting.
Okay.
And then we have our logic and accuracy testing, which, gives some degree of testing as well at the local level. And then we have our 1% manual tally that we do. And I think you're familiar with that. We randomly select 1% of all votes, and we hand count that 1%. And we report that up to the Secretary of State. And for the selection,
ranked choice voting, though, because we're talking about ranked.
And even for the ranked choice voting. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Because again, it's weird. It still needs to be checked that you could have a near exact same percentage coming out every run. I don't know. There's this popular saying, who does that?
And what I was talking about, Brent, was counting the vote each day. The county of Alameda will issue a run. Public can draw that off. It's sent to the press early on, whatever. The bottom line is the percentage transfer of votes was, for all practical purposes, exactly the same from one candidate to the other in terms of the ranked choice voting distribution every single day.
Right. And you noted that, and that's an obvious statistical anomaly that
He admitted that.
incomprehensibility.
Yeah.
So you know, obviously, again, we're in waters that we don't understand. It's an ego game where people want to understand voting system security and process and software, but it is murky. It's a murky space.
I have a question, just if I may, my friend.
Sure.
Help me with this, because my jumping off point in terms of paying attention to what happened, not to what you're saying, obviously, but in general, was when the county decided, after saying, "Hey, you know what? Okay, now Madam Mayor Tao won by 677 votes, but we're not going to call for a recount, and we're not going to actually do what they initially said they're going to do, which was to certify the election invalid, and then say, we got to do this all over again."
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, I checked out, because I thought there's something that they're afraid of when the county council comes in. And I'm not a fan of Donna Ziegler. I'll just say that publicly. I think we've had better representations as county council. Came in and basically said some words that rubber stamped the mayor winning the vote, when the popular vote wasn't even in her favor. And so I like your comment on why you think the county took the actions that it did. They say now they have this election oversight and all this, but it doesn't. But the simple fact they acted refers to the fact that something bad happened.
Right. No, well, it doesn't get any worse than the machine saying Smith one day and Jones the next when you rerun the same ballots. I mean, that's as bad as it gets. It's obvious that we have a major crisis at that point, and they know there's a crisis. They don't have any alternative system because the open source system hasn't been certified. So that is the problem. Shasta County's having it. San Francisco County's having it. Of course, San Francisco County enjoys their relationship with Dominion because the clerk there has been buddy, golf buddies, drinking buddies with their representative, Dominion's rep, for the past 15 years. So, they're having a great time. And Dominion's representative calls San Francisco's voting department, election department, his well-oiled machine. So, I mean, he says that publicly, and he says that the people of San Francisco are stupid regarding voting, and that the Elections Commission doesn't know anything about elections. So they say this publicly, and there's no consequence to Dominion for making those public statements. It's completely out of control. When we tried to get rid of the elections department head over there, Aaron Peskin sided with, who's the guy that just got fired off Fox News?
Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson, how quick we forget. Tucker Carlson and Aaron Peskin sided together to say Chris Jordanek, the vice president of the Elections Commission, was a bad person for mentioning that maybe we shouldn't have the same guy that's been buddies with Dominion there for 15 years. And it's obviously it's obvious that he's giving disinformation to the Secretary of State's office over in San Francisco, slow walking the process so we never get to open source. And then there was a mention that maybe we want to consider people of color to be in a role like that, in a position like that. Well, you would have thought that they just said, the worst thing
Good afternoon. Here is
you could possibly imagine, because as soon as they said racial equity, Tucker Carlson, Aaron Peskin, all these people chimed in against Chris Jordanic, which shows you this issue of election system security. This is Jim Crow 2.0.
Mhm.
This is all based in racist ideology. We don't have the people being able to witness the vote count, to oversee it, and it's just all, in my opinion, harkens back to Mississippi and those Jim Crow areas. And that's why I think it's so bizarre and ironic that Mississippi is ahead of California
Yeah.
for election system security.
And it seems for the foreseeable future. In other words, nothing's going to be done about it, and that's what bothers me. This sort of stuff is just accepted, and they talk about this election oversight board and all of this. But then it's a lot of so what,
Yeah, they'll go nowhere. No one there will know what they're talking about. So they'll be in that position of who to believe. And there's likely no one there to believe because no one knows what they're talking about.
Wow.
Because the only ones that know what they're talking about on this issue, it's not like you can split the baby or talk your way through it, intellectualize yourself to success. Either you're doing exactly what the open source GPL paper ballot folks are telling you, or you're screwed. It's not two ways about it. Like you can kind of use the proprietary system or slip a little Dominion in there and everything will still be okay. It ain't happening. You got to take all that crap and throw it in the dumpster and let the guys that know what they're talking about bring in the proper systems. And that is right now Voting Works until we get other vendors that are also GPL open source. You got to use the GPL part. That means general public license, because there's wise guys that are now dressing up in open source suits and muddying the space. And if they're selling some concept that's not GPL, that's how you know. By the way,
I'm going to have to run a little over time, so I have to stop right there. But everybody, thank you for joining us. Brent, we'll have you back to talk about this because it's alarming. You're the best as usual. Brent, I'll take care of this. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnowblog.com. And thank you, everybody, for watching an extraordinary day of interviews.